Well, here you are. You've officially joined the United States Army, but there's one very strange detail. No one seems to even notice your existence. You have no insignia, you have absolutely no recognition, and within the military hierarchy, you're practically invisible to everyone. However, this is not a mistake. It is, in fact, completely intentional. This is the very lowest rank in the Army, a private. Your freezing, cold days begin promptly at 5 in the morning with the traumatic sound of a bell, and after intense physical exercise, cleaning, and more training, in the mess hall, everyone ignores you and no one speaks to you. But why all this anonymity? And what exactly happens when the training finally ends? Well, something quite disappointing. In 6 months, you're automatically promoted, and now you are a second-class soldier. But there's a problem. It's not because of merit, it's not because of skill, and it's not even because anyone has taken notice of you. It simply happens because the system dictates it, and what's even worse, this new rank changes almost nothing. You're still just following orders. You're still not making your own decisions, and you're still not really anyone of importance within the hierarchy. So if no one is evaluating you, how do you keep advancing? Can you really move up without anyone acknowledging your efforts? Interestingly, about a year later, the system goes back to doing its job and promotes you to a first-class soldier. And even though the title sounds better, the reality is that you still aren't leading anyone. This is the third rank within the United States Army. And although you now possess more experience, your fundamental job remains the same: to execute orders and to perfect your skills. This is the point where some soldiers begin to differentiate themselves, because not everyone attains this rank in the exact same manner. If you joined without any prior experience, your promotion becomes automatic after just 1 year. However, if you possess military training or even a full 4-year university degree, you could start directly at this rank without having to go through the previous levels. Yes, the Army isn't just looking for strength, it's also looking for preparedness, but you still don't have real authority. For that, you need to move up 1 more rank. The next rank is Specialist. This is where things start to get interesting. Technically, you're still not an NCO, but you can now lead junior soldiers. You're expected to be an expert in your field, to execute orders with precision, and to start taking on more leadership responsibilities. You could be responsible for preparing soldiers for night patrol exercises in unfamiliar terrain, or for overseeing the maintenance of armored vehicles, ensuring that nothing ever fails. But here's a curious detail. Specialists have the same pay grade as a corporal, but they don't have the status of a non-commissioned officer. In other words, they can have more experience and more knowledge, but without the formal authority to make decisions. Many soldiers get stuck in this rank because they don't take the next step. And this is where one of the most important decisions in a military career arises: to follow the technical path or the leadership path. If you choose leadership, the next step is corporal. This is one of the oldest ranks in the Army, established in 1775. And for good reason, the corporal is the foundation of military leadership. If the Army were a body, corporals would be its backbone. Without them, everything would collapse. From this point onward, you'll no longer simply be receiving orders. Instead, you will now train others, impose discipline, and ensure that the Army's standards are consistently upheld. But reaching this point isn't easy. You'll need at least 26 months of service. You must complete the basic leadership course and receive approval from your commanding officer. If you demonstrate potential, your promotion can be accelerated. From this point on, the path becomes increasingly difficult, because simply being a good soldier is no longer enough. Now, you must prove yourself to be a good leader. If you achieve that, you can become a sergeant, and from this point, the rules change completely. Attaining the rank of sergeant is not merely a matter of time. This rank signifies a crucial transition, from being a junior non-commissioned officer to becoming a true leader within the Army. To be promoted, you require a minimum of 36 months of service, to complete the advanced leadership course, and to excel in marksmanship, physical fitness, and performance evaluations. And here's a surprising fact for you. You can actually be promoted to sergeant without ever having been a corporal before. If you demonstrate exceptional leadership, the Army can promote you directly to this rank. But don't get too carried away, because the competition here gets absolutely brutal. Promotions are no longer automatic, and only the very best advance. Pause. And as you move up, your responsibilities grow, and the number of soldiers under your command also increases. A sergeant who is part of the general staff. And this is where the rules change. Up until now, the military has trained you to obey, follow orders, and perform your duty. But once you become a staff sergeant, obedience alone is no longer sufficient. Power begins to move in the shadows. It's no longer enough to be the best soldier or the most disciplined. To advance, you need allies. You need influence. Command positions aren't achieved by effort alone. They are negotiated, built, and earned. And this is where many get stuck. You have the power to manage entire teams, oversee resources, and decide the fate of other junior military personnel. Imagine you're at a base in Afghanistan. A convoy is delayed on its route, and there's no communication with them. The commanding officer is currently occupied. The soldiers are waiting for orders, and the mission's supplies could be at risk. You are the staff sergeant. Do you take action and organize a search party, or do you wait for more instructions and risk the mission? These kinds of decisions can make the difference between a promotion or an abrupt end to your career. Promotion to staff sergeant not only requires experience, but something more. Your commander's recommendation, 84 months of service, and completing the primary leadership development course. But there's an uncomfortable truth. Being good isn't enough. You may have fulfilled every single requirement, but if you don't have the favor of your superiors, you'll simply find yourself stuck right here. A first sergeant is no longer just a supervisor. Now, with 15 to 18 years of service, you become the backbone of the platoon. You supervise multiple staff sergeants and serve as the link between soldiers and officers. If a captain wants a mission accomplished, you're the one who ensures it actually happens. Think of it this way. You're the one who decides if a soldier is punished or gets a second chance. The soldier who arrived late for formation. Is he having personal problems, or is he simply lazy? Do you punish him or do you offer him help? It's your own judgment that truly matters. But this is where politics really comes into play. Now, you don't simply follow orders, you actually interpret them. A commander will demand specific results, but they won't tell you precisely how to accomplish them. If a base in Iraq requires enhanced security, you could increase patrols, reallocate existing resources, or even advocate for additional personnel. The decision is entirely yours, and if you make the wrong choice, you could be sending your men straight into disaster. The Master Sergeant at the E8 pay grade leaves direct action behind. Now you oversee entire battalions, advising commanders and managing the operational structure at a strategic level. Here's an interesting fact. You can have 20 years of experience and still receive orders from an officer with half your time in service. But make no mistake, many times that officer will do exactly what you suggest. This is the point where military bureaucracy itself turns into a weapon. Some individuals use it to protect their soldiers, while others to advance their own personal interests. There are those who manipulate evaluations, promote their allies, and actively destroy the careers of those they consider rivals. If you don't learn to play this game, you won't get any further. But with the first sergeant, that's where everything becomes truly ruthless. Only 1% of soldiers ever reach this rank. Here, you no longer just supervise logistics and discipline. Now you control the very destiny of every single soldier under your command. If someone makes a mistake, you decide if it's fixable or if their career is over. If there's an internal conflict in the unit, you decide how it's resolved. If a soldier with potential needs a chance, you're the one who puts their name on the list. Here, it's no longer just about experience or performance. It's about who has your back, who you've lent a hand to, and who owes you a favor. Because the next promotions aren't earned through hard work, they're achieved with something more. And those who don't understand that, they'll stay stuck here forever. The Sergeant Major at pay grade E9 no longer focuses on small units or on the direct execution of missions. Now you're at strategic levels. Imagine an operation underway in the Pacific. Fuel supplies are at risk, and logistics are turning chaotic. A high-ranking officer is searching for a solution, but you're the one who truly understands the operational structure. One mistake here could leave a unit stranded or a base without critical supplies, and if you don't see it coming, no one else will. Now, this is where the crucial difference truly lies. A sergeant major is a shadow, but a command sergeant major is a presence. The command sergeant major doesn't just operate at the battalion level, but serves as the direct connection between the enlisted soldiers and the most senior officers. His decisions directly impact thousands of soldiers. Should there be any change in policy concerning discipline, training, or deployments, his influence is what truly molds how those regulations are put into practice. Consider it this way. If a general decides to implement a brand new training system, it could be a truly revolutionary reform or a complete and utter disaster. If the command sergeant major does not support it, then morale will drop. But if he chooses to adapt it intelligently, the reform will then become a great success. In essence, it can either make a commander shine brightly or lead them to utter failure. That's why the Army Department selects these sergeants with such extreme care. Not just anyone can get here. One must have clearly demonstrated strong leadership, political maneuvering skills, and absolute control over their troops. But above all of them, there is only one man, the Sergeant Major of the Army. This is not merely a rank, it is a high-level position. There's only one of these in the entire United States Army. It is the personal advisor to the Chief of Staff and the only enlisted voice that reports directly to the highest command. This is a position of great power, but it also comes with significant risks. If you hold this role, your face becomes widely known, your words are always recorded, and your decisions can turn out to be either historic or disastrous. Now, here's something that very few people actually know. Even though the Sergeant Major of the Army technically remains within the standard rank system, he holds certain protocol privileges that place him above a Lieutenant General. In strategic meetings, your opinion can carry more weight than an officer with 3 stars on their uniform. And this is where power changes hands, because right after this, we enter the officer's territory. The Warrant Officer 1 is the first tier of a new world. They are not a traditional commissioned officer, but they are also not an enlisted soldier. They are hybrids. Technically, they no longer report to sergeants, but they also do not possess the same level of authority as a lieutenant. These officers are selected from among the enlisted soldiers, but time in service alone is not sufficient. To be considered for this rank, you must submit a written application, obtain recommendations from your commanders, and be approved by the Secretary of the Army. Here, it's not just your combat experience or leadership skills that matter. Now, what truly matters is who is willing to stand by you. Because at this level, it's no longer just about following orders, but about deciding who has the authority to give them. This is where authority begins to change. It's no longer just about executing orders or supervising troops. Here, knowledge is power. Warrant Officer 2 has stopped being an apprentice. Now he is an intermediate expert with real authority. He no longer only advises commanders, but makes decisions that can change the outcome of a mission. Imagine an intelligence operation taking place in the Middle East. An infantry battalion is preparing for a nocturnal incursion, but there's a significant problem. The satellite communications system is experiencing severe interference, and the commander doesn't know whether to proceed or abort the mission. The Warrant Officer 2, a specialist in signal systems, is the only one in the room who truly understands what is happening. If he says it's safe to continue, the battalion moves in. If he says no, the entire operation comes to a halt. Here, the influence is subtle but absolute. You don't give direct orders yourself, but what you say determines what orders are issued. We're stepping up to a new level. The Warrant Officer 3. Now we're at a point where they no longer supervise just one unit, but multiple teams within an operational area. At this level, warrant officers are truly elite leaders in their specific field. Think of a military convoy transporting critical supplies through a dangerous war zone. The unit commander holds the authority, but Warrant Officer 3 is the one who determines how the mission will be carried out. If he detects a failure in the logistics, he can redirect the convoy, alter the routes, or even suspend the entire movement if the risk becomes too high. And what's most important, no one will ever question your decision because your technical expertise far exceeds that of the commissioned officers. But here's where things get even more interesting. Warrant Officer 4 no longer just handles tactics, but strategy. This rank no longer just deals with a brigade or battalion. It operates at division, corps, and higher echelons. Here you don't just apply your expertise, but define the Army's future in your area of specialization. For example, imagine you're an air defense expert. A new type of enemy drone has started to wreak havoc on the lines of defense. Commissioned officers may discuss it in their meetings, but you are the one who truly understands how to counteract it. Your job isn't merely to say, this won't work, but to develop the new combat doctrine that will determine how the Army effectively adapts to the threat. And at the very top of this structure, we find the Warrant Officer 5. This isn't simply a position, it's truly an anomaly. It's by far the rarest rank in the entire Army. There are so few of them that their names are well known within strategic circles. These officers don't merely advise, they actively mold the very Army itself. When a general needs to fully grasp how to modernize an entire fleet of attack helicopters or to effectively integrate artificial intelligence into their operational procedures, he doesn't simply call a colonel. Instead, he calls a Warrant Officer 5. Here you are no longer simply a specialist, you are truly an architect of warfare. However, even at this particular level, there is still a definite ceiling, because after the warrant officers, then come the higher-ranking commissioned officers, and in this entirely new world, the entire dynamic of influence changes completely. The second lieutenant represents the entry-level position, the first to be granted a commission, and the first one to take on leadership. A platoon of 15 to 50 soldiers depends on his orders. But here's where reality hits. The non-commissioned officers under his command, like the platoon sergeant, have more experience than him. They've been in combat. They've led soldiers for years. And here's the dilemma. If the second lieutenant doesn't quickly prove his competence, he'll lose the respect of those who truly carry out orders. Some learn quickly, others become forgotten names in reports. The first lieutenant has survived that trial. He still leads a platoon, but now he has the trust of his superiors. He's no longer the green officer who arrived to learn. Now he's expected to teach. When a convoy is ambushed on an Afghan road, it's the first lieutenant who decides whether to fight or retreat. If the ammunition supply at the base is insufficient, he's the one who negotiates with logistics to get more before it's too late. But being a platoon leader is just the beginning. A captain is a completely different thing. You're not leading a platoon anymore, you're leading an entire company now. That's 150 soldiers. If previously your responsibility was to ensure that a squadron carried out its mission effectively, now you must ensure that an entire unit functions with utmost precision. This is where the whole game changes, because the captain no longer simply commands soldiers, but also skillfully navigates the internal politics within the unit. If two lieutenants in his company have conflicts, it's his crucial job to resolve them before morale completely collapses. If the battalion's logistics doesn't assign sufficient supplies, it's your job to pressure higher-ranking officers to get more. And this is where things get even more interesting. A major with an 04 rank no longer directly commands troops and begins to operate at strategic levels. He is now a staff officer in a battalion. He no longer executes missions. Instead, he designs them. Imagine an infantry battalion being deployed in a hostile region. The major is the one who designs how the units will be positioned, what resources they need, and how the offensive will be executed. But here, the power begins to become less visible. You don't give orders directly, but the orders you give to the company commanders will determine the fate of hundreds of soldiers. And then we have the lieutenant colonel. This is the point where leadership is no longer just a simple duty, but rather an absolute responsibility. To command a battalion means you are ultimately accountable for every single life, every decision, and every failure. Should an operation go awry, the lieutenant colonel is the one who must answer directly to the high command. If the morale of the troops begins to fall, it is their leadership that determines if the unit remains effective or descends into disaster. Here, the orders given do not just impact the soldiers, they impact the war itself. But there is still more to consider, because after this point, we enter a world where leadership is no longer solely military power. This is where politics, influence, and global strategy truly begin to take command. The colonel is the very last link before crossing into the world of general officers. Under his direct command is an entire brigade, 5,000 soldiers who execute his vision, or specialized commands such as legal or medical units. But to be a colonel is not merely a command position, it's to be an architect of war. Imagine your brigade is sent to a foreign country. It's your job to decide how the troops will move, how they'll interact with the population, or how they'll face the threats lurking around every corner. If you fail to read the terrain, a convoy could fall into a deadly ambush. If you fail to understand local politics, the population could turn against you. If you fail to prepare for combat, the casualties will be your responsibility. And if you do it well, you rise to the highest levels of military power. This is where the brigadier general appears, the first general officer rank. Here, you no longer lead soldiers, you lead the war itself. Brigadier generals command combat brigades, joint task forces, and sometimes even multinational units operating in conflict zones. Under their command, they have between 3,000 and 5,000 soldiers, in addition to armored units, artillery, and air support. Their role is absolutely crucial in high-risk conflicts. They are the ones who transform strategic orders into tactical maneuvers on the ground. Imagine a brigadier general in Afghanistan commanding an offensive operation against an insurgent stronghold. His decision on precisely when and how to launch the attack could mean the difference between a decisive victory or a tactical disaster. If a battalion becomes trapped under heavy enemy fire, it is the brigadier general who must decide whether to dispatch reinforcements, order a full retreat, or risk a dangerous flanking maneuver. Decisions made in a war room can change the destiny of thousands of soldiers. The Major General is the next evolution of this power. Now he is in command of an entire division, approximately 14,000 soldiers. A division is a self-sufficient military force, complete with infantry, tanks, artillery, helicopters, and air defense systems. In a conventional war, they are the ones who lead invasions and the biggest battles. In World War II, major generals led entire divisions in the Normandy landings, coordinating the attacks that ultimately led to the fall of the Third Reich. By the time you get here, there's no room left for error. Every decision is reviewed at the highest level, and every mistake can cost you your promotion or your reputation. Imagine you're a major general, receiving intelligence reports about an enemy ambush in a combat zone. If you hesitate to make a decision, hundreds of lives could be at stake. If you order an attack without the correct information, you could send your troops straight into a deadly trap. And then there's the Lieutenant General. Here, you don't just lead battles, you lead entire wars. You command army corps, multinational forces, and oversee operations that span continents. Imagine yourself as the commander of CENTCOM, the United States Central Command, overseeing all military operations in the Middle East. Every single airstrike in Syria, every troop deployment in Iraq, every covert operation targeting terrorist groups, all of it lands on your desk. You command a force of over 80,000 soldiers, Marines, pilots, and Special Forces personnel, deployed across one of the most volatile regions on the entire planet. If a U.S. embassy is attacked in a hostile country, you decide whether to send a SEAL team to extract the personnel or launch a retaliatory bombing. If an aircraft carrier enters enemy waters, you are the one who approves or cancels the mission. Brigadier generals and major generals receive orders from you. You don't execute the war, you design it. But even here, there's still a higher rung, the general. This is the point where military leaders truly become legends. Only a select few officers ever achieve this rank, and when they do, their influence extends far beyond the battlefield. They're no longer merely directing soldiers or planning missions. Their decisions now impact entire economies, international treaties, and the global balance of power. It is they who sit in the White House Situation Room, alongside the President and the Secretary of Defense, evaluating threats that could trigger wars, a Chinese aircraft carrier in the South China Sea, a hypersonic missile in North Korea, a coup d'etat in Africa. Everything goes through their analysis. When a general speaks, the world listens. And then there's the General of the Army, the highest rank, the rarest, and the most feared. Only 9 men in the entire history of the United States have ever held this title. It is only awarded in times of total war, when the very existence of the nation is at stake. Here there are no debates. There is no bureaucracy. The Army General takes absolute control of the forces and leads them without restriction. Douglas MacArthur, Dwight D. Eisenhower, George Marshall. Men whose names not only shaped military history, but also that of the entire world. If you make it here, you're not just a soldier. You're not just a leader. You are war in its most extreme form. Don't forget to support this content by subscribing and watching this other very curious video that you will love.